HOA stole my land for 47 houses. So I let the wildfire expose them. I watched from the hill as flames crawled closer, house by house. The same homes they claimed were never mine. The same land they stole with a signature I never gave. And when the first roof collapsed, I didn't feel happy. I felt something worse, because they still didn't know the truth about who I really was, and what I had already done behind their backs. Welcome to HOA Stories, where corrupt HOAs meet real consequences. My name is Daniel. I live in Nevada, on land my family owned before this neighborhood even existed. I'm not rich. I'm not a lawyer. I'm just a guy who got tired of being bullied by people in blazers and clipboards. So if you hate controlling HOAs, if you believe homeowners deserve respect, hit subscribe right now, and type BOOHOA in the comments. Let them know we're not scared anymore. And send this video to anyone who ever dealt with HOA nonsense. Now listen carefully, because this is where it all started. I still remember the first time I saw that sign. Private Community. Golden Oaks HOA. It stood right where my grandfather used to park his old truck. Right on the edge of what was always our family land. I didn't move here. I was already here. Before the cookie-cutter houses. Before the perfect lawns. Before the fake lakes. Before the HOA board with their matching smiles. My family owned this land for over 40 years. Dirt, rocks, dry grass and all. No fancy streets. No fences. Just desert wind and silence. Then one day, bulldozers came. No warning. No knocking. No letters. Just heavy metal teeth eating into my childhood. I walked out with my coffee, still half asleep, and saw machines digging into my property. I thought it was a mistake. I screamed over the engine noise. "Hey, what are you doing on my land?" The worker didn't even look at me. He just pointed to a man in a blue polo shirt and khaki pants. The first time I met Mark, the HOA president, he smiled like a salesman. But his eyes didn't smile. He said, "According to our records, this land belongs to Golden Oaks Community." I laughed. I honestly laughed. Because my dad had paid property tax on it for 20 years. Because my name was on that damaged wooden fence. Because I knew every rock and tree on this dirt. I told him, "This is my land." He tilted his head like I was a child, and said, "Sir, sometimes people don't understand legal changes." That sentence stayed stuck in my brain. Legal changes. Changes I never signed. Never approved. Never even knew about. Within 3 months, they had built 14 houses. 14. All where my truck once sat. Where my dog ran free. Where my father buried his toolbox. And every time I complained. Every time I filed a report. Every time I showed them my documents. They did the same thing. Smile. Deflect. Delay. Their favorite sentence. "We'll review this at the next board meeting." I went to those meetings. Rows of fake smiles. Cheap coffee. PowerPoint rules about lawns. Mailbox heights. Trash can schedules. And every time I spoke, they acted like I didn't exist. Like I was just noise. Then one day, a new woman joined the board. Blonde. Perfect nails. Yellow blazer. Sharp voice. Even sharper smile. She looked at me like I was a bug on her windshield. And she said something that flipped a switch inside me forever. She said, "Well, if you feel so emotional about dirt, maybe you should have protected it better." Everyone laughed. And that's when I realized this wasn't about land anymore. This was about humiliation, power, and disrespect. And I don't lose when someone disrespects me. Not where I come from. But what they didn't know was, I had already found something buried in my father's old files. Something they never expected me to see. And that paper had the power to burn more than just houses. Now tell me this. If someone stole your family land and laughed in your face, would you walk away? Or would you make sure they never forget your name? Drop your answer in the comments. I didn't sleep the night I found that paper. Not even for a minute. I sat at my old wooden table. Lights off. Just the glow of my laptop and the sound of desert wind sliding under the door. My hands were shaking. But not from fear. From something stronger. A feeling I hadn't felt in years. Hope. That one single word printed on that old document changed everything for me. Easement. I didn't even know what it meant at first. I had to Google it like 5 times. But the more I read, the more my chest started burning. Because that paper proved something the HOA had no idea about. My father had negotiated a permanent easement line. A boundary they were never allowed to cross. A line bulldozers were never supposed to touch. A line legally protected. A line signed by a judge. A line notarized before I was even born. And they had crossed it. Not by an inch, but by a mile. 17 houses. Driveways. Yards. Sprinkler systems. Sidewalks. Electric poles. Mailboxes with HOA logos. All of it. Built on the wrong side of that easement. On my land. I smoothed the paper out with my palms. The edges were yellow. The ink faded. The signature shaky. But still there. Still real. I whispered to myself, "Dad, you saved me and didn't even know it." But even with that paper in my hand, a heavy truth sat in my stomach. Those don't care about truth. They care about control. They care about rules they invented, fines they create, reports they write themselves. And the board, they treated themselves like royalty, like mini dictators wearing cheap Target blazers. So I knew something. Showing them this paper wouldn't fix anything. It would only make them fight harder. People with small power fight like they're kings. And Mark, the HOA president, he wasn't just small power. He was the smallest man I had ever met. The next morning I walked into their office anyway. I wanted to see their reaction. To see their faces shake. To watch their confidence crack even a little. The HOA office smelled like fake lemon cleaner. The kind that stings your nose. And tries to hide the scent of paperwork and stress. Behind the counter sat the new board woman. Yellow blazer. Red lips. Perfect hair that never moved. Like a Barbie doll with a law degree she never used. She looked at me like I was tracking mud on her floor. She said, "Oh, it's you again." I didn't smile. I didn't blink. I just slid the easement paper across the counter. She read it. Her expression didn't change. But her throat swallowed once. Hard. Like the words on that paper tasted bitter. Then she said something that almost made me laugh out loud. "This looks old." I leaned forward and whispered, "So does your moral compass. But it still works." Her eyes widened. Her cheeks reddened. Her smile twitched like she wanted to slap me but couldn't. She said, "This doesn't prove anything. Anyone can forge a document." Before I could respond, Mark walked in from the back office, holding a coffee cup like he was the CEO of something important. He saw me, saw the paper, and froze. His acting was terrible. I could see panic in his eyes. Real panic. The kind of panic people get when they realize they messed with the wrong person. He grabbed the paper, scanned it, and said, "Sir, you need to stop bringing us fantasies." Fantasies. That word hit me harder than anything else. Because this wasn't a fantasy. This was proof. Cold hard proof. Signed. Stamped. Legally binding. I said, "You built 17 houses on private land. You trespassed. You dug. You poured concrete. You installed utilities. You sold homes that weren't yours to sell. You stole from my family." Mark's jaw tightened. Veins popped on his forehead. For a moment, he looked like a man losing everything. Then his face shifted. He put on his fake calm voice. The one he used in board meetings when someone asked a question he didn't like. "Sir, even if your document was real, even if the homes are already built, People live in them. You can't possibly expect us to tear down an entire section of the neighborhood. I stared at him, long, hard, silent, because I wasn't thinking about tearing anything down. Not yet. Not with my hands. But nature. Nature was already planning something. Something none of them saw coming. It was wildfire season. The driest season in 10 years. The wind hot. The grass brittle. The sky tinted brown with distant smoke. Fire crews had warned the HOA twice. Told them to clear brush. Cut tall grass. Remove dead shrubs. But they didn't listen. Because fines were more important than fire safety. Because new landscaping was more important than old warnings. Because the HOA liked pretending everything was perfect. Even when it wasn't. I walked out of the office that day. Paper in my hand. Anger in my bones. A storm inside my head. But the strange thing was, I didn't feel defeated. I felt calm. Very calm. Too calm. Like something inside me suddenly connected. Like gears snapping into place. That evening, I stood on the ridge behind the neighborhood. The same ridge I used to bike on as a kid. The same ridge where my father and I used to watch thunderstorms roll in. From up there, I could see everything. The whole neighborhood. All the new houses. All the stolen land. Every roof. Every yard. Every driveway. Then, I noticed something. A crew of HOA landscapers. Cutting dry weeds. But they weren't bagging them. They were leaving piles. Everywhere. Big dry piles on the edges of fences. Under trees. Next to wooden patios. I whispered, "You idiots! You're building spark bombs." But the board didn't care. They cared about curb appeal. Not fire hazard. And that's when the thought entered my mind. Not revenge. Not destruction. But exposure. They stole from me. And hid behind rules. Behind signatures. Behind fake meetings. Behind lies. But nature. Nature doesn't attend meetings. Nature doesn't care about HOA rules. Nature doesn't take sides. Nature only tells the truth. If a wildfire came through, the world would finally see who listened to warnings, who ignored danger, who protected their homes, and who didn't. And the HOA, they didn't. Not even close. I stood there, hands in my pockets, wind hitting my face, smell of dry earth rising, and I said out loud, one quiet sentence, "Let nature decide." I didn't know how fast things would unfold. I didn't know how close fire already was. I didn't know the wind would turn that week. I didn't know heat would spike. I didn't know flames were waiting beyond the far ridge. But part of me now wonders, did nature really decide? Or did something else push it along? Now I want to ask you this. If you saw people ignore warnings, ignore safety, ignore everything except their own power, would you step back and let nature expose them too? Tell me in the comments. Would you let nature speak for you? People think wildfires start with a giant explosion, a spark, a lightning strike, something dramatic. But most of the time, it's something small, something stupid, something preventable. And that week, everything in my neighborhood felt like a warning sign. The air tasted like dust. The wind carried heat like it had anger in it. Even the birds were quiet. I remember walking back to my truck after leaving the HOA office. My fists still tight. My jaw still locked. But inside, something had changed in me. I wasn't scared of them anymore. I wasn't confused. I wasn't lost. I was awake. Wide awake. And when a man finally wakes up, he sees everything differently. I drove around the neighborhood slowly, just watching, observing, studying what the HOA had done. Those piles of dead weeds, left all along the fences. I couldn't stop looking at them. They were everywhere. Dry, crispy, golden brown, ready to burn at the first touch of heat. HOA landscapers called it cost-efficient cleanup. I called it negligence. I called it stupidity. I called it a disaster waiting for an audience. I pulled over near the new houses. The ones built on my land. The ones they pretended were theirs. Kids were playing with scooters. Sprinklers were running in 3 yards. A woman walked her dog like nothing was wrong. Like her sidewalk wasn't paved on stolen dirt. I leaned against my truck door. Arms crossed. Eyes scanning every angle. And that's when Mark's black SUV rolled past me. Slow. Suspicious. Like he wanted to show me he was watching. Like he needed to remind me he controlled this place. He didn't roll down his window. He didn't wave. But he stared. Long. Hard. Like he expected me to shrink. Like he expected me to look away. I didn't. I looked right back. Expressionless. Unbothered. And that must have scared him more than anything I had said. Because he pressed the gas. And drove off faster than he wanted to. On my way back home. A fire engine roared past me. Lights flashing. Siren screaming. Headed somewhere beyond the ridge. It was a reminder. A loud one. Fire season wasn't coming. It was already here. By the next morning, smoke was visible far in the distance. A faint brown line across the sky. Like someone had taken a dirty brush and dragged it across the horizon. But the HOA pretended nothing was happening. They sent out emails about approved mailbox paint colors. And reminders about trash can visibility violations. Not a single mention of wildfire safety. Not one. Not even in fine print. That afternoon, I drove up the ridge again. The same ridge I stood on the night before. I wasn't planning anything. I wasn't trying to start anything. I only wanted to see, to understand, to think. And from up there, the whole place looked small. Smaller than it ever had. Like a tiny model town built by people who thought they were smarter than nature. I could see the dry patches. The weeds. The dead shrubs. I could see where the landscapers had cut corners. Where the HOA had ignored warnings. Where they had gambled with other people's safety. And the irony. The painful irony. They fined people for lawn colors. But ignored the one thing that could actually kill the neighborhood. I sat on a rock. Watching the wind twist dust into tiny spirals. Watching the smoke line in the distance grow thicker. Watching the sun turn red behind the haze. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. You need to stop causing trouble. No name. No signature. Just that sentence. I smirked. Not because it was funny, but because it confirmed something. Something important. They were scared. They were watching me. They knew I had something they couldn't bury. Something they couldn't fine away. Something they couldn't rewrite in a meeting agenda. Truth. And truth is dangerous. Especially when small men are living inside big lies. That evening, the wind changed direction. It blew harder. Hotter. Straight toward the neighborhood. Carrying tiny particles of ash. Barely visible. Easy to ignore if you weren't paying attention. But I was. More than ever. I walked to my backyard. Stood on the edge of the old property line. Ran my hand across the dry brush. The same brush my father used to burn safely each year. Before he got sick. Before the HOA banned unauthorized vegetation clearing. He used to say, "A clean yard keeps fire away. A messy yard invites it." But HOAs don't listen to old wisdom. They listen to rules written by people who never lived near a wildfire. Around midnight, I smelled it. A deep smoky scent. Thicker than before. Heavier. Closer. I stepped outside. Looked toward the ridge. And my heart paused. A faint red glow. Barely there. But strong enough to know exactly what it meant. The fire had jumped. It wasn't miles away anymore. It was near. Too near. But even then, I didn't panic. I felt something else. Something cold. Something steady. This wasn't revenge. This wasn't a plan. This wasn't payback. This was nature. Doing what nature does. Cleaning what humans ignore. I whispered again. Not loudly, not proudly, just honestly. Let nature decide. The next morning, everyone smelled the smoke. Everyone saw the haze. Everyone felt the heat shift. But the HO. Oh no. They didn't talk about fire. They held a meeting about fence heights instead. I swear I'm not making that up. People were coughing. Ash was settling on cars. Kids couldn't play outside. But Mark was on a folding chair telling people their fences were visually disruptive. And I stood in the back, arms crossed, listening, watching, knowing. Nature was already walking toward them, step by step, wind gust by wind gust. Not because I wanted chaos, but because they built a neighborhood on ground they didn't respect, land they didn't understand, soil they didn't belong to. And fire doesn't care about HOA boards, or their confidence, or their fake authority. Fire only cares about fuel, and the HOA had given it plenty. The meeting ended. People walked out talking about smoke, and safety, and evacuation plans. But Mark, he walked out smiling, acting like he had everything under control. I watched him. I watched the way he adjusted his shirt. The way he pretended not to notice the ash landing on his sleeves. The way he ignored the sky turning orange. And deep down, I wondered something. If nature gives people warnings, and those people ignore them, is it really nature's fault when the fire finally arrives? I'll let you answer that. Would you blame the fire, or the people who dared it to come? The following morning, I woke up to the sound of an email notification. I rubbed my eyes, expecting it to be another spam message from the HOA reminding residents about proper mailbox decorations, or something equally ridiculous. But this email was different. Subject: Boundary clarification. Immediate review required. Sender: HOA Compliance Office. My stomach dropped. I clicked the email. Attached were 3 PDF files, each stamped with a bright red watermark, confidential, do not distribute. Inside the files were newly drawn property maps, maps I had never seen before. Maps that were not the ones referenced in my deed, the county's GIS portal, or the surveyor's measurement report. These maps were altered. The HOA had literally redrawn the boundary lines so that my backyard, and half of my garden, were now claimed by them. I sat back, heart pounding, anger sparking in my chest like wildfire. They weren't just lying. They were fabricating evidence. I forwarded everything to Mark, my lawyer. 5 minutes later, he called. "Where did they get these?" he asked immediately. "These aren't just wrong, they're forged." "I know," I whispered. "What do? We keep moving. If they're sending documents this desperate, it means we're closer to the truth than we think." He was right. But that truth was about to get uglier. HOA meeting madness begins. That evening was the monthly HOA meeting. I hadn't planned to attend, but something about those forged maps made it impossible to ignore. If they were bold enough to fabricate boundaries, what else were they hiding? I walked into the clubhouse, and instantly, I felt the tension. HOA board members sat in their semicircle like judges, stern, stiff, and waiting to pounce. And of course, at the center sat Karen, the HOA president, wearing her trademark pastel cardigan and a smile so fake it belonged in a museum display of artifacts of manipulation. She watched me walk in with narrowed eyes. "Oh look," she said loudly, "the boundary violator has arrived." The room snickered. I didn't react. I took a seat in the front row. Karen cleared her throat, tapped her microphone, and started the meeting. "First on today's agenda is the issue of improper yard encroachment by homeowner." She paused dramatically, as if announcing a villain in a movie trailer. "The resident of 14, Timber Creek Lane." Everyone turned to face me. I raised my hand. "Yes, I'd like to speak." Karen smirked. "Of course you would." I dropped the bomb. I stood, taking a breath. "I'd like to address the maps your office sent this morning." Instantly, there were whispers. Karen's smile twitched. "Yes, those maps clearly prove you extended." "No," I interrupted firmly. "Those maps prove you are altering property records, which is illegal." The room went silent. Karen's jaw went rigid. "Excuse me." I pulled out the printed copies I brought. "These aren't county maps. They're digitally altered copies of the original. Same font, same scale, but your board moved boundary lines." Several neighbors gasped. One man muttered, "Is that true?" Karen clutched her pearl necklace, as if offended by oxygen. "These maps came from the county," she lied boldly. "No," I said, holding up my phone, "because I called the county. And guess what? They've never seen these versions." The board members quietly exchanged panicked glances. Someone in the back whispered, "That's fraud." Karen slammed her notebook shut. "This meeting is adjourned." "No," I said loudly. "Now I'm speaking." The room froze. "What you're doing is not only unethical, it's illegal. And unless this harassment stops immediately, I will escalate." Karen's face turned red. "Escalate how?" "To the county. To the state board. To the attorney general. To the news." That shut her down. She stood, chin trembling with rage, and stormed out of the room, leaving the rest of the board in disarray. The neighbors watched her leave, murmuring, shocked. For the first time since this began, I felt the room shift in my favor. The neighbor who knew too much. After the meeting, a man approached me. I recognized him vaguely, quiet, kept to himself, always mowing his lawn at the same exact time every Saturday morning. He leaned in and whispered, "You need to see something." My heart skipped. "What is it?" He glanced around nervously. "Not here. HOA members talk. Cameras everywhere." I blinked. "Cameras?" He nodded slowly. "Cameras you don't know about." A chill trickled down my spine. "Come by my place tomorrow evening," he said. "I'll show you." He walked away before I could ask anything more. What did he know? What had he seen? What was the HOA hiding with cameras? I went home shaken, unable to sleep. The forged maps were bad. The HOA lying was bad. But secret cameras? This had officially crossed into disturbing territory. And tomorrow, I would find out just how deep this went. When I got home, there was a notice on my door. As if the day hadn't been chaotic enough. A bright yellow paper was taped to my front door. Final warning, property violation, $4,000 fine issued. My jaw dropped. They had escalated the boundary dispute into a $4,000 fine overnight. I laughed, an exhausted, angry, disbelieving laugh. They weren't backing down. They were doubling down. But so was I. Tomorrow, I'd learn the truth behind the cameras. Tomorrow, I'd gain an ally. And tomorrow, the HOA's secrets would start unraveling. Sleep didn't come easily that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I kept replaying the meeting, the forged maps, Karen storming out, the neighbors finally doubting her authority. But it wasn't just that. It was the neighbors' words echoing over and over. "There are cameras you don't know about." That phrase crawled under my skin like a warning from a horror movie. What cameras? Why? And more importantly, who had access to them? By mid-afternoon the next day, my nerves were shot. I kept glancing out the window, half expecting someone from the HOA to barge onto my lawn with yet another bogus notice. Instead, my phone buzzed. A message from the quiet neighbor. "Come over." Back door. That was it. No explanation, no details. Just instructions. I grabbed my keys and headed out. The neighbor's house was too quiet. When I arrived at his home, everything felt still. Not creepy, but almost staged, like he was trying very hard not to draw attention. He opened the back door immediately, pulling me inside as if someone might be watching. The blinds were drawn. The lights were dim. "Thanks for coming," he whispered. "Sit." I sat at his kitchen table while he locked both the back and front door. Then he checked the window blinds again. Okay, now it was officially unsettling. He finally sat across from me, fingers tapping anxiously on a flash drive. "You're not the only one the HOA's been targeting," he began. "They've been doing this for years." I swallowed. "Doing what?" He slid the flash drive across the table. "Surveillance." The word hit like a punch. They installed neighborhood security cameras, he explained, but what they didn't tell anyone is that they also put hidden ones, illegal ones, near homes they claim are repeat violators. And they monitor those houses far more intensely than others. That's illegal, I whispered. He nodded. I know. And I have proof. The footage that changed everything. He led me down the hallway into what looked like a converted home office. Multiple computer monitors, stacked external hard drives, and a desk cluttered with paperwork. It wasn't messy, but it was a workspace built out of necessity, not hobby. He clicked on a file named Incidents. Video thumbnails appeared, grainy nighttime footage, daytime clips, timestamps going back months. This is your house, he said. My heart lodged in my throat. He opened a video. The timestamp showed 3:17 a.m., 2 weeks ago, the night I first noticed the HOA's sudden interest in my garden. In the footage, 2 people were walking around my yard with flashlights. One of them held measuring equipment. They were carefully stepping around the plants, measuring distances, taking notes, photographing my fence line. I gasped. They were on my property. Yeah, he said softly. 3 separate nights. Always between 3 and 5 a.m. He played another clip. This time, the figures weren't measuring, they were moving my property markers. They actually pulled up one of the survey flags my professional surveyor had placed and reinserted it several feet off. That is criminal, I whispered, feeling my face flush with anger. I told you, he said. This HOA is not just corrupt, they manipulate evidence. They trespass. They tamper. I sat down, shaking. It was worse than I thought. Why, he finally spoke up. You asked me yesterday why I know all this, he said quietly. It's because they did it to me too. That surprised me. What happened? He sighed. They didn't like where my shed was placed, even though it was compliant. They moved my property yard line markers in the middle of the night, claimed I built over HOA space, fined me, and threatened legal action. That's the same playbook they're using on me, I muttered. Exactly. But I fought hard, brought a lawyer, and gathered video proof. Before I could expose them publicly, they suddenly dropped the entire issue, and then started targeting someone else. Me, I realized. He nodded sadly. Karen doesn't back off, she redirects. A cold ripple went down my spine. He pulled up the final video clip, last night, 4:09 a.m. On screen, someone walked past my house again. This time it was a single person, wearing a hoodie, and the same pastel cardigan wrapped loosely around their waist. Karen. Caught. On video. Trespassing. And that, he said, is why you need to protect yourself. They are escalating. The plan we formed. We talked for nearly 2 hours, strategies, documentation, legal leverage. He gave me the flash drive so I had access to everything. Make backups, he warned. They've hacked into residents' security systems before. That nearly made me choke. What? They claim it's part of their community safety review, but they actually use it to monitor rule compliance. This was spiraling into something far more disturbing than a property dispute. Before I left, he looked at me seriously. Once they know you're fighting back, they'll double down. Be ready. I nodded. I already am. But nothing could have prepared me for what happened next. HOA retaliation. Level up. As I walked back home, I saw Karen's SUV creeping slowly down the street. She made eye contact with me, cold, unblinking, intentional. She knew. She knew I had something. The SUV slowed even more as she passed my driveway. And then she smiled. Not a friendly smile. A warning smile. By the time I got inside, another email notification popped up. Subject: Urgent. Community Compliance Inspection scheduled. Message: Your property has been selected for an immediate mandatory inspection. Failure to comply will result in additional fines, suspension of HOA privileges, and legal escalation. They wanted to get onto my property again, legally, this time. My hands curled into fists. Not anymore. Now I had their weakness. That night, I backed up every file onto multiple drives. I emailed Mark, my lawyer, sending him the footage with timestamps and summaries. His response was immediate. "This is enough to tear the entire board apart." But he also said something else. "Be careful. People like this don't go down quietly." And he was right. Because the next morning, before sunrise, someone banged on my door so hard it rattled the windows. I froze. 3 HOA board members stood outside, clipboards in hand. Karen in the middle, smiling. "Inspection time," she said sweetly. But this time, I was ready. Karen stood on my porch with that plastic smile that never touched her eyes. The 2 board members beside her, Alan and Patricia, clutched their clipboards like they were about to perform a military raid instead of a neighborhood inspection. "Good morning," Karen said, her voice dripping fake sweetness. "We're here for your compliance inspection." The sun wasn't even up yet. I leaned against the doorframe, crossing my arms. "It's 6 in the morning." She widened her smile. "Yes. That's when we do surprise inspections. That's when burglars break in," I muttered. Her smile twitched. I didn't move. I didn't invite them in. Because this was exactly what my lawyer warned me about. "Are you refusing?" she asked sharply. "No," I said calmly. "I'm just recording everything." Her eyes flicked to the phone in my hand, then to the small body cam clipped to my shirt, then to the exterior cameras I had installed overnight. She swallowed. "Good." I opened the door just wide enough for them to enter. "Proceed." They weren't here to inspect, they were here to destroy. They didn't walk in like inspectors. They walked in like they owned the place. Karen marched straight toward my living room, running her hand across the mantel as if searching for dust to find me for. Alan wandered off toward the kitchen without permission. Patricia walked toward the hallway like she had been inside before. "Do not enter any rooms without my consent," I said firmly. Karen turned slowly. "We have full access rights." "No," I said, pulling out a printed document. "These are your HOA bylaws. Page 22. Inspections must be limited to exterior structures unless the resident signs a consent form, which I have not." The look on her face was priceless. Patricia blinked. We always inspect the interior." "Then you've been violating your own bylaws," I replied. Karen snatched the paper from my hand like a child grabbing candy. Her cheeks flushed. "Let's just move on." "Yeah, I thought so." They tried to plant violations. We stepped outside. Karen headed straight for my fence, my perfectly legal fence, measuring tape already in hand. She measured the height, the distance to the property line, the distance from the sidewalk. Her eyes narrowed. She wanted something to be wrong. Anything. Spoiler, it wasn't. Alan checked the siding on my shed, tapping the wood aggressively as if hoping it would fall off. Patricia paced back and forth across my driveway, comparing photos on her clipboard. Finally, Karen exhaled dramatically. "This fence looks suspicious." I almost laughed. "Suspicious how?" "It seems newer." "That would be because I pressure washed it yesterday," I said. Her jaw tightened. She walked over to my garden, kneeling down dramatically like a crime scene investigator. She dug her fingers into the soil. "Your mulch is different," she declared. "Yeah," I said. "I changed it." "You didn't file a landscaping modification form." "It's mulch." She straightened up. "Mulch color affects community harmony." I blinked slowly. "Do you hear yourself?" I asked. For a moment, she said nothing. Her nostrils flared. "We're writing you up for unapproved landscaping." I smiled. "Oh, please do." All 3 paused. Because they knew what I had. Evidence. Video. Their crimes. Their trespasses. Every bogus violation they wrote strengthened my case. For the first time, Karen looked worried. They thought they found their golden ticket. Suddenly, Alan's voice echoed from behind the shed. "Aha!" We rushed over. Alan was pointing at a PVC pipe connected to the sprinkler line. "This isn't HOA approved," he shouted triumphantly. Karen lit up. "An unapproved irrigation system?" Alan nodded. "Yes. This is grounds for a major violation." I stared at the pipe. Then I stared at them. "That's not mine," I said. "That's the community water line. It's been there before I moved in." Alan froze. Patricia squinted. "Wait, isn't that?" I pulled up my original home inspection photos on my phone. Held the screen up. Same pipe. Same position. Same installation. Karen's smile cracked like glass. "You're falsifying violations," I said quietly. They didn't speak. They didn't move. They just stood there, realization washing over them. Every desperate accusation they made was now documented. Recorded. Proof. They walked into my trap. And then, they slipped. Karen turned to leave, muttering something about following up later, but Patricia stepped on the loose gravel and stumbled. Her clipboard fell. Papers scattered everywhere. Property reports, resident complaints, violation lists. And then one page landed at my feet. I picked it up before Patricia could grab it. It was titled, "Target List, Priority Residents. 10 names. 10 addresses. Notes next to each one. Violations to monitor. Tactics to use. Ways to pressure them." My name was number 3. I lifted the paper slowly. "What is this?" Karen lunged for it. "That is not official HOA documentation." "So you admit it's real," I said. She froze. The panic in their eyes told me everything. They had been secretly targeting certain homeowners. Systematically. Strategically. Illegally. This wasn't mismanagement. This was organized harassment. They knew they were finished. Karen straightened her cardigan, forcing composure. "This inspection is concluded," she said briskly. "We'll be in touch." They practically sprinted toward their SUV. No smug smiles. No threats. No fake sweetness. Just fear. For the first time, they were scared of me. I watched their SUV speed away, dust rising behind it. And for the first time in weeks, I felt like I wasn't drowning. I was fighting back. And winning. But I also knew something else. People like Karen never back off. They retaliate. And what came next was bigger than anything I had seen yet. If your HOA showed up at 6 a.m. with clipboards and fake authority, what would you do? Tell me in the comments. I'm curious how wild your ideas are. I didn't sleep that night. Not from fear. From clarity. Everything had shifted. The HOA wasn't a shadow anymore. It wasn't a threat sitting quietly on my lawn at midnight. It wasn't whispers, fines, inspections, rumors, or forged maps. Now it was paper. Video. Proof. And proof is heavy. Especially when it lands in the right hands. At 8 a.m., I met my lawyer, Mark, at his office. He was already waiting with 2 coffees and a smile that told me the storm had officially turned in my direction. "You brought me gold," he said. I handed him the target list. He read it twice. Slowly. His grin faded, replaced with something colder. "This isn't just harassment," he said. "This is conspiracy." That word hit different. He opened his laptop. "Let's end this." The evidence package. Together, we built a file, clean, organized, airtight. A video footage of trespassing. A video of them moving survey markers. A recordings from the inspection. A voice clips where Karen contradicted bylaws. The forged property map. The neighbor's hidden camera archives. The target list. Every piece made the next one worse. It wasn't a case anymore. It was a demolition. By noon, Mark had sent the entire package to Heavy Checkmark, the county attorney. Heavy Checkmark, the state HOA regulatory office. Heavy Checkmark, the local ordinances board. Heavy Checkmark, every single homeowner in the neighborhood. But the last one, that was the nuclear bomb. Because once the other homeowners saw the target list, everything changed. Within 30 minutes, my phone exploded with messages. People I had never spoken to were texting. They targeted me too. They fined my grandma for using the wrong patio chair. Karen threatened to tow my car for parking in my own driveway. Thank you for doing what none of us could. I wasn't alone anymore. And neither was Karen. HOA emergency meeting, the one everyone showed up for. That evening, the HOA called an emergency meeting to clarify misinformation. But everyone knew what it really was. The trial. By 6 p.m., the community center was packed, standing room only. People who usually ignored HOA drama showed up with folding chairs and popcorn. I walked in. Everyone fell silent. Some nodded at me. Some whispered. Some patted my shoulder. For the first time, I wasn't the outsider. On stage, Karen sat with her board members. Her posture was stiff, her smile glued on like a cracked sticker. Her voice trembled as she spoke into the microphone. There has been a misunderstanding. Mark stood up before she could finish. No, he said. There's been a violation of state law. People murmured. Karen swallowed. And then Mark pressed play. The video of them trespassing at night appeared on the big projector. Gasps filled the room. Someone in the back yelled, "Is that her?" Someone else shouted, "That's my yard too." Then came the footage of survey markers being moved. Then the forged maps. Then Karen stepping into my yard at 4:09 a.m. And finally, the target list appeared on screen. That room turned feral. People shouted, demanded answers, demanded resignations, demanded investigations, demanded her removal. Karen tried to speak, but every time she opened her mouth, the crowd grew louder. Her board members shrank in their chairs, staring at the floor like kids caught stealing from a candy store. It was over. And everyone knew it. The vote. The bylaws required a 60% vote to remove the board. We got 91%. It wasn't even close. Karen stood up, cheeks burning red, eyes sharp like broken glass. "You'll regret this," she hissed at me. But I just smiled. Because she finally understood. You don't get to bully people forever. Eventually, the neighborhood fights back. The board was dissolved on the spot. A temporary committee was formed. And the county attorney stepped forward, informing everyone that a formal investigation had already begun. Karen stormed out, slamming the door so hard the projector wobbled. People cheered. Not for me. For themselves. For finally being free. The aftermath. Over the next week, everything changed. The bogus fines. Cancelled. The forced inspections. Declined and removed. The illegal cameras. Taken down. The forged maps. Reported and archived as evidence. The HOA office. Sealed until further notice. Neighbors actually came outside again. Kids played in driveways. People waved. People talked. For the first time, the neighborhood looked like a neighborhood, not a dictatorship. Even the quiet neighbor, the one with all the footage, finally walked down the street without flinching at every shadow. He stopped at my driveway. "You did it," he said. I shook my head. "We did it." He smiled for the first time. Karen's final move. You'd think she'd disappear, right? No. 5 days later, a sheriff's deputy knocked on my door. "Are you the resident who submitted the HOA complaint?" he asked. My stomach dropped for a second, until he smiled gently. "Good news," he continued. "We're filing charges. Against her. Trespassing. Harassment. Document tampering. Misuse of authority. And conspiracy to defraud homeowners." The deputy handed me a copy of the report. Karen wasn't getting away with anything. Not this time. Life after the HOA War. The new committee asked me to join them. I said no. I didn't want to be part of the system. I just wanted peace. But I did ask for one thing. Protect the neighborhood. Not your power. They agreed. And for the first time, I walked through my yard without anxiety. No clipboards. No measuring tape. No pastel cardigans at sunrise. Just quiet. Just home. The land was mine again. And the wildfire they feared? It wasn't flames. It was truth. It was the community waking up. And once people wake up, they never go back to sleep. If you were in my shoes, would you have taken down the HOA or walked away quietly? I want to hear what kind of fighter you are Drop it in the comments.